Hello, hello, hi. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Sage. I hope you've all been having a great day. Hope you've been checking out all of the games in the main showcases and having a great time. Welcome to Sage Advice. Some of you might have been checking out some of the other panels today. You might be new to this one. Either way, we are very pleased to have you. And this panel is, as you can see up there, Power Up, How to Market Your Game. This is all about marketing, promotion, all the fun stuff. And we've got a great panel here who are all experts in the field to talk to you about it. You might notice that we do have one invisible panellist at the moment. He is here and I'm told he is coming, so we may have a latecomer. We'll be welcoming a latecomer, but let's kick off, otherwise we will run out of time. So introducing the panel, we have to my left here Dr. Jacqueline Burgess, who is an award-winning educator and researcher from the University of the Sunshine Coast, where she is a senior lecturer in marketing, among other things. Chantal Chateauneuf, senior marketing manager at Epic Games, who's come over from Victoria. And Chantal handles all things events, sponsorships and regional marketing for Unreal Engine in Australia, New Zealand and Southeast Asia. And then on the end there we have Meredith Hall, who is a multi-award-winning games developer and head of marketing for Wings, which provides project funding to games made by teams founded or co-founded by women and gender marginalised developers. In a minute, we may be welcoming John Cartwright, and I can give an introduction to him then when he decides to become uninvisible. But for now, let's kick on with our all-female panel, which I'm not unhappy about. So look, I think let's just start. We've probably got a range of experiences and backgrounds and understandings in the audience here. So I think let's start with the basics. What does marketing your game actually mean? And Jacqueline, perhaps I can throw this to you because you actually teach marketing to MBA students. So can you talk us through the fundamentals? What are we talking about when we talk about marketing?
Thanks. So I think the most important thing when we talk about marketing is actually what we are not talking about, or what is not marketing. Because often when you think marketing, like just everyone in the room, think marketing. What are you thinking? What words are popping into your mind? I'm thinking some of you are thinking advertising, maybe selling, things like that. I'm seeing a few nods in the room. Yeah. So that is, do I need to pause and introduce the invisible chair?
Let's all pretend that let's all pretend that we can't see John. And don't pay no attention to the man behind the curtain.
So I'm the diversity hire anyway.
Jacqueline, I'll invite you to finish your thought and then we can announce John. And I think he might actually have something to say in relation to what you're talking about. So continue.
Thanks, Petra. So that's not marketing. Those are little tools that are part of marketing. Marketing at its core is about your much broader strategy. It's about ensuring that you are adding value for all parties. So value for you as a developer, because you obviously want to make some money and stay in business, right? Value for your players, because you want your players to have a genuinely enjoyable, fun, valuable experience with your game. And then value for society as well, because if you are a financially sustainable studio, you can hire people, you can give back, you can do all kinds of great things for society. So that means everything you do that adds value in some way, that's what marketing actually is. So I like to say that marketing is actually inherently ethical, because some of you too, when you think marketing, might be thinking, ew, selling, ew, that's nasty, it's tricking, it's lying, it's nasty bad stuff. No, that is one little tool of marketing that is being used in a corrupted way. Marketing adds genuine value. It is authentic, it builds a solid reputation, and it relies on really important relationships between you, your studio, your game, and your players. You have to understand them to be able to genuinely add value and make a game that they want to play and talk about a game that they want to play.
I'll take the opportunity now to introduce John Cartwright, Games Business Development Consultant from GameConsulting. So John has been pitching, developing and shipping games for over 30 years. He works full-time as a consultant helping indie developers with pitching, budgeting, production and more. John, do you have anything to add to the discussion of what is marketing? What are the fundamentals?
Absolutely, I do. And I got caught up because somebody was selling their game out there. So I kind of have a good excuse. Exactly, there you go. So, but it's interesting we sort of talk about what marketing isn't. And I've worked in free-to-play. And there will never be enough showers to make me feel clean, because a lot of what that was is what you're talking about in terms of the fact that it's unethical and it's about trying to I kind of part fools from money, really, or part money from fools. So it's very, it is very dishonest. It's very obfuscated. There's a lot of things when I worked in free-to-play where it was, no, we don't want to tell the players this. We are literally trying to fool them. We are trying to squeeze this money out of them. We don't want them to know how this system works. There was a lot of effort went into things behind the scenes to make it as obscure as possible so that players didn't understand. And I think, very, as Jacqueline was saying, it's very, very different. Like marketing is about what your game is and who you're selling it to. And one of the things when we were all talking the other day, for me, marketing starts when you are designing your game. The marketing of it starts, if you're not taking that into account when you're designing your game, you are going to run into trouble later. And there's a few very simple things that I rant on about all the time, and it's about broadening your addressable market, which is who you can market your game to, who you can sell your game to. And there are two key ways you can do that. One of them is the platforms that you're on. So can your game run on PC? Can it run on console? Can it run on mobile? And that's a technical choice in terms of when you're deciding on what game engine you're going to use. And then there's another way to broaden your addressable market, and that's with localization and languages, because amazingly, there are other languages than English. Did you know?
I've heard something about
rumors.
that. But
it's a shock. It's, yeah, confirmed. But it's about selling to people who don't speak your language. And depending on your game, that choice, the choice of languages is going to vary a lot. So if you're doing like a strategy game, there are a lot of stereotypes, but Germany loves strategy games. You can read into that what you will, but Germany loves PC games and Germany loves strategy games, right? So if you were not localizing for German, I had a call with a developer just yesterday who randomly had decided they wanted to put their game in Hindi, and I'm like, why Hindi? And he goes, I figure there's a lot of Indians like games. And I'm like, well, look, you're right, but let's look at that market. And the Indian games market is very, very mobile focused. I mean, cricket aside, if we just put the cricket, because obviously I'm mad about cricket. So like, there's a whole load of things right at the start that you are deciding that about your game marketing, or you should be deciding about your game marketing from day one.
Yeah, so just building on that, and maybe Meredith and Chantal, you might have some thoughts. Thinking about marketing from the start, John's raised a few points there. What kind of thoughts do you actually need to put into that? So it's not just thinking about, well, it's the language or it's the market that I'm selling into and what type of strategy should it be. What else do people need to think about when it comes to thinking about marketing from the get-go?
One of the really important things, so for context, my background before I joined Epic, I actually come from more like the film and TV space. So something that I actually encountered more often than I would like is someone pitching me that their project, their concept, whatever, was for everyone. Don't do that. Your game is not for everyone. If you are making a game as a passion project for yourself, that's one thing. That's great. Awesome. You do you. If you are trying to make a game that you want to generate revenue from, that you want to build a business off of, you shouldn't be making a game for yourself. You need to do your market research and understand the kind of game that you're making, first of all. What are some, similar games in that genre? What is, something that maybe sets your game apart a little bit from existing games in that genre? Because those are the players that you would be going after, and being able to kind of differentiate yourself and understand what your audience is looking for is really important.
Yeah, and I think jumping off that, doing it early means that you actually have the capacity and the capability to shift your design slightly. So if you're starting to build out this game and you're exploring a certain audience and you're looking at the games in that space and all of that audience is saying, gee, I wish these games had X, you have an opportunity to then go, oh, I can actually add that and I can add value, as Jacqueline was saying before, to this game before I get all the way down the line and look at what my game is and go, oh, I've made a game that is like 10, 20, 50 other games out there, right? That there is so much content that is going online that is being played by different people. And if you can't articulate the things that are different about your game, you're actually competing for time more than anything else. It's not just with other games. It's with movies, it's with friends, it's with social life, it's with work, it's with family. There's all these other things that people are dedicating their time to. And you're actually trying to prove to them, hey, I think this is worth your time. I think this is valuable to you. So if you can't articulate those things or identify those things about your game, you're not necessarily going to be able to communicate them to your audience later on.
And if you can actually get an elevator pitch, it's a very overused sort of phrase, but it's like if you can't explain your game in a couple of sentences, you're done.
And just briefly, there's like so much data out there, as Meredith was saying. Like, you don't need to even survey and even talk to people if you're absolutely on day dot. Like, have a look at Steam reviews for other games that are similar. See what people are saying that they love and what people are saying that they don't love. There's an indie team who's released a game. It's good. They've got a publisher. They were trying to decide which of what, two engines to build their game in. It's a narrative-focused game. They were doing their market research, looked at Steam reviews. One thing that came out was people wanted to be able to replay and make different choices and see different options. One engine only allowed for 3 saves, one engine allowed for a whole lot more. Guess which engine they picked? Simple example of marketing in action, early using data.
And just tiny thing on that note is it's really easy, I think, when you're new to marketing to go with what you feel you know, right? Like, you think about your game and you're like, well, it's inspired by these 5 different games. It's really easy to one-to-one those things when actually you're taking little pieces from all different games. So one thing I'd really encourage you to do is actually break your bias. Break down your game into different things. It might be you have your 3 main mechanics that are really core to your game, your 3 main themes, your 3 main tags that you think you use on Steam. Use that as a scoring metric when you look at these other games, because you'll be surprised how that switches out the structure. The amount of times that I see pitch decks coming in that are like, well, like Zelda. And I'm like, are you? Because you're a team of 2 people and you're making a completely different game in a completely different space that just happens to be an action adventure. Are you actually like Zelda, or is that the frame of reference that you happen to have? You need to kind of dig a little bit deeper, and there are a bunch of tools out there that will help you do that.
Yeah, and it's, you know, it's, you might be making Zelda, but you're probably making Aldi Zelda, right?
100%.
Aldi
But
Zelda.
good difference.
I mean, I would play Aldi Zelda,
I
to be
think
fair.
Aldi Zelda might be exhibiting at Sage next year.
See me next year.
I sincerely hope so. So look, I think everyone seems to be in agreement that identifying your audience is like kind of step 1. It's like super important. I feel like it would be helpful for the audience if maybe each of you could kind of identify like, what's a practical tip for how to do that? You know, how do you identify what your audience is? If you had to sort of give one sort of tip, what would it be? How do you work out who your game is for?
I mean, that competitor analysis work I think is really critical, and there's a lot of really good data out there around kinds of players. So you might not necessarily need to dig immediately into deep demographic data or anything like that. I think it's easy to end up on a statistics website and be like, the addressable market for an action game is 3 million people and they all live here. And it's like, if you talk to 2 different people in that place, they're going to have a completely different experience with games. But Newzoo and Quantic Foundry are 2 really, really good sources of information that talk a lot about like player motivation and like, why do different players play? What are they interested in? What do they enjoy? And then once you have a sense of where your game fits on that, you can actually apply that to other games and go, okay, there's even actually like a gamer motivations test that I will sometimes reverse engineer. So I will answer that quiz as though I'm trying to find other games I'd like to play, but as if it's the game that I'm currently designing, because that will actually give you a sense of, are the games that are coming up the ones I'm expecting, or are they something completely different? Am I actually ending up in a totally different space than I expected?
That's a great tip. Chantal?
We kind of touched on this already, but I think identifying comp titles is really important. And when I say comp titles, I mean realistic comp titles, not Zelda. I mean,
And by that you mean comparative titles, right? Games that are like your game.
Yes. Yeah? So you having a good understanding of similar games in the market and, you know, what those players are looking for from those games is really important. Yeah,
I think echoing Meredith, first of all, there's so much secondary data out there that's free that you can access. Like, definitely you should be getting on those resources, getting on those reports. And then once, I think, a little bit along the track, once you've started to actually maybe build up a social media and a bit of a public following and profile, like, have a look at your analytics. Like, a lot of devs starting out, like, don't look at their social media analytics. Like, see who is actually following you and engaging with you and your content, and that's going to give you some great tips and tips for localization as well. I know a studio where they were making a game, they weren't thinking about it, but they were looking at their analytics, and suddenly, boom, they're getting a load of people from a few states in America, and they were like, well, and a bunch of people from a country in South America as well. They were like, oh my God, we need to put these languages up the, priority list. We need to start doing some dedicated content for these markets, and so on. So that helped broaden out their accessible market.
There we go. I think when I see pitch decks and when I teach people how to pitch, I really advise them not to look at stats and sales for other games, Because quite often I'll see, like, oh, you know, this game and this game and this game, and they've sold 4 million units, and this has sold 6 million units. And all that does is tell me that your title has sold no units and that you are looking at very, very successful titles. And so I think I much more encourage people, find games that are comparable. Find what are the games people are playing who are going to play your game. Because if you're pitching, whether it's to a publisher or whether it's to a screen agency or whatever, but just to try and get that message, who is the market for your game? And rather than going, it's a game for everybody, because of course it never is, it's like, oh, it's people that like the climbing bit from this game, or the combat from this game, or the whatever from this game, but we're doing this with it, right? What you don't want to come across as, Aldi Zelda, is like, we're going to do like this game, but we're going to be worse, because nobody wants that.
A tiny thing on that as well. Don't just compare yourself to the game, but compare your team to theirs. It's really easy to look at a team of 50 people or 100 people or 20 people and go, we're going to make the same thing, or we're going to make something similar. And you just don't have access to the resources in the same way. So understanding if they've got a publisher, they've had a different experience. If they've, engaged with people before, and reach out to them if you are a similar size and ask them what's been working for them. Like, developers are very quick in the indie space to share what's successful, and you'll be surprised how much you can learn from that.
I think as well, I'm not against people comparing themselves to other media where it makes sense. Like, if your game is very sci-fi, is it for Star Trek or Star Wars people, right? Not to say that, like, oh, you're like Star Wars, but it's like, if people like Star Wars, they might like this part of this because you've got whatever it is. So comparing to other media can be valuable as well.
Some great practical tips in there. Thanks, everyone. So look, we've addressed audience, but we all know that a huge part of marketing and promotion is storytelling. So how important is story and narrative, and identifying your story and narrative and creating that, either about your game or your studio, when it comes to marketing? Who wants to take it?
I can start.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's incredibly important. I think if you even use words amongst friends, you might say something's really tense. That word is so different for different people, and their expectations and baggage that comes with that word is so strong. And that extends even further when you get into a localization. I think there's a word in either French or German that in one language means gift, but in another language means poison. So it's like, that is a really common thing. And so when you're trying to understand what you're trying to say, specificity is so important. Don't just say that don't say your game is unique. Why? Don't say that your game has a beautiful art style. Why? How? Like, the more that you can get specific in what you're trying to communicate, the easier it is for an audience to understand, oh, so it's like this and this and this. Now I get the game holistically. And it means you're managing their expectations on the other side, because the more vague you are, the more likely they're going to go, I think it's this. The second you say your elevator pitch to someone, they've created a different game in their mind. And your job as a marketer is actually to shave down into what the game actually is.
And then make sure you can deliver that as well. Like, cough, No Man's Sky, cough. That's number one, because marketing builds expectations. Every single piece of communication you put out there is shaping someone's mind. So you want to make sure that what you've put out there and what you've shaped, you can actually meet it. It's all about customer satisfaction. In marketing, customer satisfaction is great. Like, we as consumers, whether that's of video games, of McDonald's, of home appliances, whatever, we want to be satisfied, but we want to be more than that. We want to be delighted. That's what marketers aim for. Delight is slightly exceeding expectations. So you don't just want to meet expectations. You don't just want to make sure that you can accurately deliver what you described and what people expect. You actually want to do a little bit better. You want them to be delighted. So it's really critical that you harness and shape those expectations, but then actually slightly exceed them. And in terms of your communication, continuing Meredith's amazing point, is also, what's your call to action? Like, when you're putting communication out there, have people do something. Is that wish list you on Steam? Is that channel them to a Discord that you've been building? Is that channeling them to like your 1 or 2 social media platforms that you're managing? Like, what do you actually want them to do? It's not just enough to give them a really lovely message. Obviously, you have to give them a really lovely message, but then what do you want them to do after they've seen the really lovely message?
I think coming back on the managing expectations, we're talking about indie games here. We're not talking about 200 people teams, that kind of thing. And there's a lot around that, around the story of you, that makes sense. Now, there are some games where it's very, very personal. If you look at something like Unpacking, the story there is of Ren and Tim moving in together. Now, I don't think that was actually a marketing decision. I think they just fancied each other and whatever, and they're getting married now, unless they're really playing the long game. I mean, that's some pretty deep marketing.
They got BAFTAs though, so that's worth it.
It's all been worth it, yeah. But that was a great story. If you look at anything around unpacking and when that was coming up for release and what have you, there were a lot of stories about the fact that it spawned from a real life event of these two people. And that gives you a real sense of, this is two people. There were more than two people involved in making it, but it's like, it gives you an idea of the scope. You're not dealing with a multi-million-dollar budget here. You're not dealing with any of that. And so that then sets your expectations about the quality. And so you are, I'm not going to say it's easy because it's never easy, but it is easier to delight that audience because you are setting the expectation of like, hey, this is coming from indie developers, right? This is not Assassin's Creed. You are far more likely to be less than delighted, whatever we want to call that, with a AAA title because they get built up like nobody's business, and people go, oh, this year's Call of Duty is rubbish, or oh, that Assassin's Creed was disappointing, or whatever it was, because so much hype and there is so much expectation, and you build that in your mind. Right, and your expectations get super, super high. But when we're talking with indie games, it's a magnitude lower, and you can be delighted by things from 2 and 3 people.
Yeah, sometimes the story is you. And I remember this story a journalist friend told me once that I always laugh at, where he was walking around PAX Australia and he was trying to find stuff to cover. And he'd been talking to this guy about his game for maybe like 20 minutes, and it was all like, yeah, it was a cool game, it was all good. And then the guy finished kind of his spiel about development so far, and he was like, oh yeah, and I made the whole thing in my chicken shed. Yeah. And the journalist was like, sorry? What do you mean? He's like, oh yeah, no, I didn't have a space in the house that made sense. And so I would set my computer up in the chicken shed and I would dev in the chicken shed for 8 hours a day. And that was the article. So sometimes you almost have to interrogate, where it's come from, the world around it. Maybe you're making a commentary on something that's bigger than just the game. Like there's a lot that can be spoken about, and it's really easy sometimes to get so zoned in on, the game itself that you forget that there's a whole world here and there's a lot of you that you're putting into it. So I think including that can be a really fun way to tell a different kind of story that people find interesting too.
Yeah, that's all great advice. John, you kind of touched on budgets and resourcing. I think, a lot of people visiting Sage today and probably in the audience today would be just starting out, or perhaps they haven't even started out, they're thinking about it, probably smaller emerging studios. And even if they're not emerging, they probably don't have a huge budget or resources, on the level of like Assassin's Creed, as you've said. So for small or first-time studios, people with not much budget or resources, what is the best marketing strategy that they can think of to go out with that creates value? What can you do if you don't have heaps of cash and staff?
You can, there's a bunch of things everybody will talk about here. You can show it to people. One of the best things you can do is show it to people and get feedback. So whether it's something like Sage or AvCon or wherever, and get feedback from people, the important thing is that you learn and you take that feedback. You can't just go, I've had developers I work with, and we've done play tests, and they've literally said to me, can we get some different play testers because these ones don't like it? And it's like, no, I think you've missed the point there. So like showing it to people is absolutely, that's something that you can do that's relatively low cost, right? You can go to a dev meetup, whatever, and it's getting you feedback. Obviously there's social media, and we talked a little bit earlier about measuring like what works. So if you do something, obviously nobody's got any attention span anymore, so it's all like GIFs and like loops and what have you, and that's fine. Have you got a game that fits into that, and can you put stuff on social media, and can you test it and see, well, what works? Those are things that you might get traction from. I certainly wouldn't say that, oh, look, going viral should be your marketing plan. There's a bunch of games that have been successful on the back of it, but it's you might as well just hope your game's going to be successful. So I think there's that. Showing it to other people, just getting that feedback, going out there, but also consuming games yourself and working out where you stand, I think is really worth doing. If you develop in an entire vacuum, you've got nothing. It's very hard for you to be competitive, and it's very hard for you to know how to sell your game if you don't know what other games are.
I think also if you're low on time and money, don't set yourself up to fail. I see a lot of teams who go, we're going to be on every social media and we're going to post 2 times a week on every single social, and we're also going to do devlogs.
And we're going to have a Discord.
And we're going to have a Discord. And we're going to have a Discord for our very, very narrative focused game that is a single linear playthrough, and we're going to maintain that forever. No one, you can have teams that have 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 full-time marketers that cannot sustain that level of work amongst everything else that needs to happen. So, and it becomes really demoralizing, right? Because you go, this is what I'm going to do, and then you're sunk under with dev work and you've got a bunch of other stuff to do and you only got one post done that month and you go, I failed already. I already couldn't keep to what I was trying to do. So often it's just what is actually sustainable for you and what channel makes sense. If it makes sense for you to do a video once a month because you want to sit down, stream your development work and then share that video as a VOD on YouTube, let that be your channels and learn what you can from that and improve on that instead of trying to be everywhere and be everything to everyone, because it's just not sustainable.
And I think as well, make sure, like way back at the start, make sure you've actually got a game that people are going to be interested in. Like before you start anything, you know, that's the best way to save money.
Don't be crap, basically,
Well,
Jacqueline.
You said that, not me. But no,
Not always achievable.
But no, I know several devs where they have made some fake gameplay, i.e. they've just made video art, not actual gameplay footage, that is pretty close to kind of what they're envisioning. And they put it out there on social media, like 5-10 times to see what kind of traction they get. And do they get any traction? Is there enough interest in this fake game that it's actually worth then putting in all the time and the money to actually make said game? I know of at least 2 games who did that and then got a lot of traction and are now deep in development and are getting a lot of buzz.
That's really interesting, actually, because it ties back to what you guys were all saying about starting marketing from the get-go. And I mean, that's starting marketing before the get-go, isn't it? Like, that's actually marketing an idea to see if anyone likes it before you go, we're going to invest time and money into making this. So that's amazing strategy. So you guys have been talking a lot about, there was elevator pitches, there's gathering data. Some of this stuff requires some specialist knowledge, and obviously there's ways of learning about that if you don't already. But what about the concept of bringing on experts to help you? You know, is this a viable strategy? Who would you advise it for or not advise it for? You know, do you bring on a marketing expert onto your team? Do you bring on a publicist? Do you bring on a wordsmith? What are your thoughts on that for maybe a smaller team?
Depends on the goals, right? Like I think as Chantal was saying, like if you're looking to make a game just kind of for you, you may not need any of that. You might just want to experiment a little and see what works. But if you're trying to make a commercial project, then you need to think about those goals. But it's really important to understand that a marketer is not a silver bullet if the game doesn't have anything to create conversation. And that's a really hard thing sometimes, is that you might be brought on to work on a game and there's no unique selling point to it that would make it compelling enough for someone to spend the time on. And that's really disheartening, right? When you're all the way in development. So the best marketer in the world can't sell something or give something to a player if the player's not interested in it. So you really, that early work that you can do is almost more important, that research, that outreach, because if you have a strong sense of that, you may not need to have a whole bunch of external support. If you don't need to do a bunch with press, you may not need to hire someone to send all of those things. You can send a press release to a couple of places and be done with it. So I think knowing what you want from it is really important before you bring anyone on. Otherwise, you can spend a lot of money getting someone to do a bunch of work in trying to understand your game before they can actually do anything with it and action it.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's stuff you can kind of do exploratory, like rather than hiring somebody, because hiring somebody is like, that's a big responsibility, that's a big outlay, it's a big commitment. But you can have a meeting, you can say, hey, look, can I have an hour of your time? Can I buy an hour of your time? Can we talk about this? And that might tell you, oh yeah, I don't need a marketer. I actually need to go and work at a supermarket. You know, it might kill your game, right? If your game isn't marketable, but also that's actually really valuable. If you find out it's not marketable, then you should probably give it up. But by getting that advice, you'd be like, oh, okay, fine. The other thing is, if you do bring somebody on board, are you able to direct them? Do you actually know what you want them to do, other than like make my game a success, which is I think that's a little bit generic, a little bit too high level. But it's like, do you know? Are you in a position to manage them? You know, you can't just say, "Oh, I've hired a marketing person, all my problems are solved." It's like, well, how? It comes back to, do you know what your marketing? Do you know what your game is? Do you know what your audience is? What are you trying to achieve? You need to be able to give them some direction. So you have to think about that. And if you're not able to do that, it's probably not worth spending the money, I would say.
Okay, what about media, or dare I say it, influencers, right? So what makes for a compelling pitch to the media, which I guess could also apply to publishers, and John, you know a lot about this. What are some common mistakes that you see devs make when trying to get attention for their game, either with the media or with publishers, or just generally in marketing?
I mean, I think with publishers, a lot of people are broadly dreadful at pitching. And in terms of describing, everything we talked about in terms of describing their game, why it's unique, why it's good. Because if you're pitching to a publisher, you need to tell them how they can make money. It's kind of grim, but it's like they don't necessarily like you. They might like your game, but they like money a lot more. And if they think they can make money, then they're going to be interested. So you need to persuade why that is. And that comes back to everything we've been talking about, like who is the audience? Is there an audience that can be sold to? Another thing that I see a bit too much actually is a bit of kind of swagger and arrogance from people who maybe don't have the experience, and they're like, oh yeah, I want this, and I'm doing, and it's like, whoa. Know your place. It's like, be a little bit humble, and then if it all goes well, fucking great, right? So yeah, I mean, those are probably that, and completely misjudging how much money somebody is going to supply you with. I don't think we've talked about it yet, but another key part of your marketing plan is how much is your game going to cost? You need to know what it's going to sell for, and that's going to be a function of like, well, how much do you spend on it? And I have this discussion the whole time of like, well, so how many copies does that game need to sell to make back what you want to spend on it? Sorry, that's 1 million copies? Are you on drugs? Because that's not happening. So you need to rescope, or you need to look at your price, and all that kind of thing. And so it's all about that. And again, when I coach developers to go and approach publishers, it's like, have your price. What is your retail price going to be? And it can be wrong, but it can't be too wrong. You can't be going, oh, it's $100 US. It's like, no, it's not, champ. And have your budget and when you're going to like finish. It's not a matter of like, well, what's it worth? What are you going to give me, Petra? It's like, it doesn't work like that. So it's being very, very specific.
2 quick points on that. Oh, sorry, Chantal. You should.
I was just going to say, especially when it comes to pitching, like something that's really important is when you go into a room, don't get caught up in the nitty gritty of everything to do with your game. But this whole idea of having an elevator pitch is really important, and being able to summarize what your game is in a clear and concise way, and then move on to the other things that the publisher is going to care about. How much does it cost? Where are you at in your dev cycle? When are you going to release it? How much are you going to sell it for? These are the kinds of things that matter, if not more than the actual game itself. Like these, and obviously, your game is your baby, right? Like you are so invested in something that you have put, blood, sweat, tears, money into. But you have to realize that the people that you're pitching to are not in that same space with you. They see pitches all day, every day. They, frankly, it's kind of exhausting. Being, getting pulled into like all of this kind of minutia that really doesn't matter ultimately. So yeah, I think that's really important.
Just on publishers too, while we're talking about them. There's sometimes, I think, a feeling with indie devs like, oh, we'll get a publisher and then we won't have to do any of the marketing. It'll all be taken care of. Yeah. And nah. Like, unless you're their absolute superstar, like, they've bought up Team Cherry or House or whatever, there's going to be other priorities, and they are not going to replace your marketing. You're still going to have to do at least some of it. I know devs who have relied on publishers, and their engagement and their metrics have dropped because they stopped everything, thought the publisher would handle it. Publisher was not a replacement.
And I think just on kind of press and influencers as well, like, if everybody wants the influencer with 1 million followers to play their game, right? They're like, that's the ticket, that's the key. I think it's really important to remember as indies that there are indie press outlets and there are smaller influencers that are out there that would love to cover your game, that would love to play it, that would love to speak to their audience about it. And often those audiences, even though they seem smaller, they can be far more dedicated and far more interested. So quantity does not always mean quality. I think be willing to engage with all sorts of levels of media and all sorts of levels of influencers. Sure, you might reach out to that giant influencer and you'll get an agency email back and they're like, it's going to be this much money. And you go, so sorry, don't have the budget, really appreciate it. Thank you for letting us know. Here's a key anyway. And you never know, like they may actually play it. But a lot of those smaller teams that you can build relationships with and those smaller streamers, those smaller outlets, everybody starts somewhere just like you are with your game. So if you want the world to kind of extend you the kindness of engaging with your product, make sure you're doing the same thing when it comes to kind of smaller outlets and smaller creators.
And the thing is that you start small and it's one of the few times it trickles up. actually. So, I mean, I've had experience of this where small streamers have taken on a game and then larger streamers have seen it. And I've worked on games where I've had very large streamers stream the game for free, whereas they would normally charge people. So we're going back quite a few years now, but back when Stampy Longnose was a huge Minecraft YouTuber, he approached us to stream the game, and we thought it was a hoax, because you get a lot of hoax stuff. And it was like, oh no, actually is him. And he did like a 13-part series on our game, and it's like, oh my God. And when I was working on Dredge, Team 17 paid Gab Smolders to stream it, and then her boyfriend, Jacksepticeye, said, oh, can I have a key? And he's huge, and he did a bunch of streaming for free. So it's like you take what you can get and you build it from there.
Just on that, if I can add quickly to some hot off the press research I have done, which is not even actually publicly available yet. You're getting a world exclusive scoop. I found that players are actually pretty distrustful of like everyone in terms of information, pretty much, unless they're like a personal friend or family or community they're active with, or streamer they've had a good relationship with, like a smaller streamer that's got a dedicated following. That's when they trust. So the smaller guys can be more dedicated and actually more trustworthy.
That's all really great advice. And Meredith, just going to plug you here, talking about journalists and people who have the smaller, maybe the smaller indie dev newsletters and things like that. Meredith has her own indie dev newsletter. If you haven't signed up, you should talk
Have stickers.
She has stickers. So talk to her after the session today, and I'm sure she'll hook you up. But that's all really good advice. I think that's very solid. So. Okay, let's talk practicalities, because that's what everyone's here for. Everybody wants the magic, top 3 bits of advice that they can take away today and go home and put into marketing their game and have an overnight success. Obviously, that's not guaranteed. We are not guaranteeing that to anyone here today. But if I had to sort of go down the line here, what are some practical tips that you can give indie devs today that they can take away and start applying today when it comes to marketing their game? John?
Start with me. I actually think so we talked a little bit about what publishers will do for you and even if you have a publisher, what they will still be looking for. Publishers will still be coming to you for screenshots. And it will be the bane of your life. So one of the things that I would advise developers to do, build a screenshot mode in debug so that you can get rid of your HUD, so that you can position the camera, you can do all the kind of effects so that you can create nice screenshots, because screenshots always useful. If you've got a way of capturing video and putting out GIFs as well of bits, worth its weight in gold.
Yeah, great. Jacqueline?
I always stick to the market research stream. Think about your localization early in your process. Like, English is not like other languages. Other languages can be longer. So if you are trying to do full localization, you're trying to cram what might be 4 or 5 times as many characters into slots that then completely mucks up, your interface and everything. That can be a problem. So start thinking about that practical localization early.
Don't be afraid to kill your darlings. Like, take feedback on board. Your audience ultimately are the ones who are going to be buying your game. And if the feedback that you're getting is that something isn't working, it's probably not working. So, yeah. Don't be afraid to move on from things that maybe aren't working, even if it's something that like you personally really love. If it's not working for your audience, then it's not going to work.
2 tiny ones. First one is, it's really easy to get bogged down in demographic data, which we've talked about, which is like age, location. If you've ever put 2 18-year-olds in the same room that don't know each other, they're not necessarily going to get along. They're not necessarily going to have the same thing in common, even if they grew up in the same place. So try to think about what's called psychographic data, which is much more about like who people are and what they're interested in and what they want to engage with. So that's one. The other one is build a press kit so that you are easy to find. There is somewhere where if somebody wants to write about you or fund your game or talk to somebody, they can. And if you want to take it a step further, make an influencer kit, which is things like transparent background PNGs that you can give to people so they can make thumbnails more easily, so they can promote your game. The easier you make it for people to talk about your game, the more they're going to talk about it.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I was actually going to add that on at the end, Meredith, so thank you. You've stolen my thunder there, but I would definitely agree, and I'm coming at this from more of a press media point of view. I have a journalistic background, and absolutely agree. A press kit that has not just screenshots and photos and video of gameplay footage of your game, but photos of you, good photos of you and your team.
Particularly in the chicken shed.
Particularly in the chicken shed.
Get your chicken.
With chickens.
With chickens, absolutely. The
And
more you can
without.
stage the shot, but good photos. I would say that it is worth paying a little bit of money to get an actual photographer to take some good photos of you and your team. So not just your iPhone selfie photo, but some actually good photos with good lighting of you and your team. If you have a studio that you work in, take the photos there. Otherwise, do a cool. Imagine it's your album cover. You're a cool band and it's your album cover. This is how you want to put yourself across. 100% get one of those. And also touching on what Meredith said, make yourself easy to contact. The amount of people who advertise things in, I guess it's cool to kind of not have any way of contacting you or to have an email address or anything like that on your website or on your social profiles. It's really annoying. If a journalist has come across something and they think, wow, this is amazing, I wonder if these guys are from Adelaide. Who would know? Because they haven't got it anywhere. They could be from America, they could be from China, you wouldn't have a clue. There's no way of getting in touch with them apart from DMing, and who knows whether they're even checking their accounts. So make yourself easy to approach and easy to find out about, so that people, but journalists in particular, can be quite lazy and they're sometimes looking for an easy win. And if you can provide them with all of that information on a platter and make it easy for them, then you're going to make it easier for yourself to get coverage.
I've written articles about my own games in the past and provided them to journalists, and they've been published verbatim.
That's what a media release is, guys.
But so you can control the narrative.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're not wrong. I mean, that sounds funny, but I mean, that's essentially what a media release is. And even if you're not in the position to be doing a media release, if you have a website or if you have some sort of profile where you can put up a blog where you can publish your own news, you can do this about yourself. Write your own news about yourself and put it on your website and put it through your social media. That's where journalists are probably going to find out about you anyway if they don't already know. So yeah, take control of the story yourself, I would say. Okay, so I think we're coming up to the end. I think we have a few minutes left, but I would like to kind of end with another bit of practical tips and advice. I know people love that when they come to Sage. So for devs starting out, what do you think is the sort of must-do number one action before you start promoting your game? Was that a tough one? Sorry.
I don't know how to not be repetitive apart from market research, and actually learn about marketing as well. You don't always, if you've come particularly from education, you don't always have that marketing and business knowledge. So invest in yourself as well.
I think also if you're not a sole developer and you're working in a team, sit down and find a marketing workshop online that gets you all to write down about the game. So if there's 3 of you, all of you separately sit down and write, here are the things I think the game is, here are the things I think the game isn't, and compare and contrast your own ideas of the game, because that can really help identify where there are things that are unclear, or maybe you're using same but different language and you actually need to get more specific with that. It can be a really good way to start to build out some of your tone. That was something that we did at Summer Fall Studios, where we had essentially a spectrum from end to end, and it would be light-hearted to serious. And it's I got all of the founders, I'm stick a dot on that line where you think the brand voice is. And it was really interesting, the conversations that came out of that, because they all had a different kind of process of approaching those things. So there are a lot of really practical tools online that will help you find your voice and find your tone. And having that sense can really help you when it gets to writing store copy, taking screenshots, the kind of mood you're trying to create with your game. Because you're selling an emotion. It's an emotional experience, like a film or an album. It's not something that someone needs to live, like food in the same way. So keep that in mind. What are you trying to actually communicate emotionally?
Yeah, I suppose my addition to that would be kind of taking both of your points, refine and refine and refine before you go live, as it were. Don't just go out with kind of the first thing you have in mind. I guarantee you, the first synopsis you write, the first, press release you write, it's probably not going to be the one that you want to put out. So take the time, because, first impressions do matter. and being able to go out with something where people are like, yes, I get it. And people aren't left being like, wait, what? Like, you're not going to have that chance again. So you need to put your best foot forward.
I think try and formulate some kind of plan of what you want to do beyond posting your first thing. Because your first thing could go well, it could go terrible, but what are you doing next? And if you haven't got a plan, one of the things that I've done in the past is if I was going to, schedule, like have a bunch of tweets or posts or whatever, I would try and write a whole bunch of them so that I've got a bunch ready to go. So if it goes well, if it goes badly, but it's like I'm not scrambling for the next thing. Have I got a month's worth of stuff to post? Have I got 2 months? Have I got a week? But have I got something so that I can respond to how it goes? And then measuring. This is something that when we were having a chat the other day before this this panel of like actually measuring what you're doing, because it's like I might have a plan to do this, 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 and this. Is it working? Is it worth carrying on with that plan, or do I need to pivot and make a change? Yeah.
All wonderful advice. I think there's been a lot of really great practical tips and advice given today. I hope you've all been taking mental notes, if not actual notes. Thank you everyone for coming today. I hope you enjoyed the session. I'd like to thank all of our speakers today for participating. I know some of you are in multiple sessions today and tomorrow. So thank you very much. Would you please join me in thanking our panellists today?